You scroll through your phone in bed, already exhausted by a day that hasn't begun. You dress for a job that pays well, but doesn't pay you back in meaning. The commute blurs past, like a film you're watching but not starring in. At lunch, you eat while staring at a screen, consuming content about other people's lives. The food has no taste you'll remember. Evening comes. You've been productive, and the metrics prove it. Tasks completed, emails sent, meetings attended. Yet as you lie down again, that familiar weight settles on your chest. Not sadness exactly, not depression, just emptiness. A peculiar modern ache, the feeling of being overfull yet malnourished, connected to everything yet touching nothing, alive but not quite living. You are not alone in this. You are experiencing what millions feel, but rarely name, the profound emptiness at the heart of modern abundance. In the next 30 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why modern life feels so hollow, and more importantly, what you can actually do about it. This isn't another self-help video. This is about understanding the invisible architecture that's been designed to keep you empty. Viktor Frankl witnessed something in the concentration camps that defied all logic. The physically strongest didn't always survive, but those who maintained meaning did. In his observations, Frankl wrote, "What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for a worthwhile goal, a freely chosen task. You live in what Frankl called the existential vacuum. Think about your ancestors for a moment. They woke to immediate purpose, crops to harvest, predators to avoid, communities to sustain. Every action connected to survival. Every day demanded presence. Their meaning wasn't chosen. It was given by necessity. Now think about your morning. You wake to what? Emails that could wait. Meetings about meetings. Tasks that, if left undone, would change nothing fundamental about anyone's existence. You're not struggling for bread. You're struggling for a reason to get out of bed. Here's the brutal truth. Your phone offers 1,000 micro-purposes, but these aren't meanings. They're distractions from meaninglessness. You're kept busy enough to avoid the question, but never satisfied enough to stop asking it. Frankl observed in his post-war practice, the existential vacuum manifests itself mainly in a state of boredom, but not the boredom of having nothing to do. You have endless things to do. It's the boredom of doing endless things that don't matter. You're productive, but not purposeful. Efficient, but not effective. Optimized, but not alive. The modern world's answer. Find your passion. Follow your bliss. Live your best life. But these platitudes are precisely backwards. Frankl discovered, through both his experiences and his practice, that meaning doesn't come from within. It comes from without. He wrote, "Being human always points and is directed to something or someone other than oneself." You refresh your Instagram feed, looking for meaning in the curated lives of others. You buy things, courses, supplements, subscriptions, believing the next purchase will be the one that makes life feel real again. But meaning isn't an internal state to achieve, or an external product to acquire. It's what happens when you stop looking at yourself and look at what life is asking of you. Pause for a second and actually think about the last time you did something that felt genuinely meaningful, not productive, not impressive, but actually meaningful. Think about it. If something comes to your mind, Please leave your answer below. Kierkegaard, writing in 1844, Copenhagen, diagnosed a condition that wouldn't fully manifest for another century and a half. He describes standing at a cliff's edge. Anxiety may be compared with dizziness. He whose eye happens to look down into the yawning abyss becomes dizzy. Hence, anxiety is the dizziness of freedom, which emerges when freedom looks down into its own possibility. The concept of anxiety. You live permanently at that cliff's edge. You're on Hinge. Match with someone. Conversation's good. But before you even meet them, you're already wondering if someone better is 3 swipes away. So you keep them at arm's length, just in case. And they're doing the same to you. Nobody commits. Nobody risks. Nobody wins. Similarly, open LinkedIn. Thousands of career paths. Open Netflix. Infinite entertainment. 4 hours later, you've watched nothing, just browsed possibilities. Barry Schwartz documented what Kierkegaard intuited in The Paradox of Choice. After a certain threshold, additional options decrease satisfaction. In one study, shoppers presented with 24 varieties of jam were 90% less likely to purchase than those shown only 6. More devastating, even those who did buy from the larger selection reported lower satisfaction with their choice. But you face something worse than 24 jams. You face infinite careers, infinite places to live, infinite identities to construct, infinite content to consume. Every moment, your phone presents unlimited alternatives to whatever you're doing. You're never fully anywhere because you could always be elsewhere. Kierkegaard understood that this freedom becomes unbearable. He wrote, "The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. Every choice you make murders infinite alternatives. Every path taken is 1,000 paths untraveled. The weight of unlived lives crushes the life you're actually living. Your ancestors had what psychologist Jonathan Haidt calls the constraint of reality. Geography limited their options. Social bonds were given, not chosen. Work was inherited or obvious. These constraints didn't limit fulfillment, they enabled it. A river needs banks to flow. Without constraints, water becomes a stagnant swamp. Now you have no banks. Every boundary is permeable, every commitment reversible, every choice subject to endless reconsideration. You're not flowing, you're spreading thin, evaporating under the heat of infinite possibility." Jung spent his career mapping the psyche's geography, and what he found disturbs comfortable assumptions. He wrote, "The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society. Fittingly enough, a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others, and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. But you don't wear one mask, you wear dozens. Switching between them so rapidly, you've forgotten which face is yours. The LinkedIn you, optimized for professional advancement. The Instagram you, curated for maximum engagement. The family reunion you, designed to avoid conflict. The first date you, edited to attract. Your phone contains different versions of yourself, for different platforms. You're a brand on Instagram, a resume on LinkedIn, a set of interests on dating apps, a collection of opinions on Twitter. You've become what sociologist Sherry Turkle calls alone together, presenting a self while never presenting yourself. Jung described patients who had so identified with their personas that they'd forgotten a self existed beneath. He wrote, "The danger is that they become identical with their personas, the professor with his textbook, the tenor with his voice. Social media promised authenticity, be yourself, share your truth, but it delivered the opposite. Performative authenticity, curated spontaneity, edited honesty. You share your struggles, but only the photogenic ones. You're real, but only the marketable version of real. This isn't just exhausting, it's existentially corrupting. When every moment and experience is potential content, pre-processed for sharing, no moment is sacred. You don't live your life, you produce it, direct it, edit it, and then publish it." Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny or repress. But how can you integrate what you won't acknowledge? How can you become whole when you're constantly performing wholeness? Your shadow isn't just repressed, it's deleted, filtered out, cropped from the frame. The result is what I call persona collapse. So many masks worn so constantly that they merge into a bland, optimized average. You become a human corporation, a walking personal brand, a 5-star rated version of yourself that satisfies everyone and fulfills no one, especially yourself. When Nietzsche proclaimed God's death, he wasn't celebrating. The full passage continues. "How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we need to invent? You live in the crater left by this absence. Your great-grandparents inhabited a cosmic drama. They were characters in a story that began before them and would continue after. Birth, marriage, death. These weren't just personal experiences, but participations in eternal patterns. Sunday meant something. Seasons meant something. Ritual meant something. Now what structures your life? Quarterly earnings, fitness goals, vacation plans, content calendars, TV show releases. You've replaced the liturgical calendar with the fiscal quarter, the sacred with the scheduled, the eternal with the trending. Consumer culture rushed into the vacuum. Your phone is full of apps, promising transcendence through transaction. Meditation apps selling enlightenment for $9.99 per month. Fitness apps promising transformation in 30 days. But keep this in mind, you've just discovered what Silicon Valley fears you'll realize. The void has no bottom, and no app can fill it. Philip Rieff called this the triumph of the therapeutic, the replacement of religious and communal frameworks with psychological and individual ones, where once you might ask, what does God require of me? Now you ask, what would make me happy? But happiness pursued directly evaporates like morning mist. Viktor Frankl wrote, happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue, and it only does so as the unintended side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. But what cause? What dedication? What is greater than yourself, when the self is all there is? The psychologist Philip Cushman describes the empty self, a self experiencing itself as lacking, requiring constant filling from outside, but attempting to fill existential emptiness with material goods is like trying to satisfy thirst by drinking sand. The more you consume, the emptier you feel. We've covered the diagnosis, why modern life systematically creates emptiness, still with me. Good, because what comes next changes everything. This is where we move from understanding the problem to actually solving it. You now understand the architecture of your emptiness. The question becomes not how to fill it, but how to transform your relationship with it. The philosophers who diagnosed these problems also lived through them. Their solutions weren't theoretical. They were lived practices, tested in the laboratory of their own existence. These next 4 practices aren't theory. They're actionable, and they work. Pick even one of these, and your life will change. The solution isn't more choices, more optimization, more self-improvement. It's less, but less chosen consciously, deliberately, as an act of rebellion against the tyranny of infinite possibility. Kierkegaard called it the leap, the decisive choice that creates identity through limitation. You cannot become everything, so you must become something specific. But modern life resists specificity. It wants you general, flexible, pivotable, a human stem cell capable of becoming anything, but therefore being nothing. The ancient Stoics practiced what they called voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing constraint to build resilience. But you need voluntary constraint for a different reason, to build depth. When you remove options, you stop browsing life and start inhabiting it. William James, the American psychologist philosopher who helped found pragmatism and modern scientific psychology, wrote, "The art of being wise is knowing what to overlook. But you've been trained to overlook nothing, to keep all options open, to never fully commit. FOMO, fear of missing out, has become your governing principle. But what about FOMI, fear of missing in? Fear of never going deep enough into anything to strike water. Consider the craftsman. He doesn't keep his options open. He chooses wood over metal, furniture over sculpture, chairs over tables, this chair over all possible chairs. Through limitation, he achieves mastery. Through constraint, he finds freedom. Through saying no to everything else, he says yes to something real." The philosopher Byung-Chul Han writes about the tiredness society. Exhausted not from doing too much of one thing, but from doing too little of everything. You're tired not from depth, but from surface tension, from spreading yourself across infinite shallow puddles, rather than diving into one deep well. Start with this. Choose your constraints before they choose you. Limits aren't fences around your life. They're the frame that lets the picture come into focus. A river only becomes a current when it accepts its banks. Identity works the same way. Who you are is shaped by the vows you keep and the options you release. So choose one limit and honor it for 7 days. One app gone, one outfit routine, one project finished before another begins. Watch what happens to your attention, your patience, your craft. Depth returns, time thickens, quiet becomes usable. This isn't deprivation, it's devotion. Saying no to almost everything so you can say yes to what is yours. When you narrow the gate, you widen the path. Start now. In a world that profits from your emptiness, the most radical act is refusal. Not angry rejection, but sacred refusal, the deliberate choice to stop participating in systems that perpetuate hollowness. Thoreau wrote from Walden, "A man is rich in proportion to the number of things which he can afford to let alone." He didn't retreat to the woods to escape society, but to discover what was essential by removing everything that wasn't. You were trained to spend your life saying yes to everything. From childhood, politeness meant compliance. At work, being a team player meant availability. Online, every platform rewards engagement, not discernment. Scarcity whispers everywhere. This might be your only chance. Belonging feels fragile. Modern practices have made refusal feel like exile, but a clean no is an instrument. It turns an empty field into a tended garden, where you choose what takes root and what paths to draw. It returns weight to your yes. A true no is not hostility, it's stewardship. Speak it once, without apology or explanation. Let the quietness stand. In that cleared space, your life begins to gather itself, and your next yes becomes holy again. The mystic Simone Weil wrote about decreation, making space for the sacred. By removing the self, you're constantly creating yourself, optimizing, producing, performing. When do you decreate? When do you stop generating material and start generating space? Decreation is disciplined subtraction, taking off the costume so the real you underneath can breathe. Always practice removal before addition. Space isn't absence, it's hospitality for the sacred. Start practicing sacred refusal. Refuse to document the moment, to experience the moment. Let memory keep it. Refuse to have an opinion about things that don't matter. To recover attention for what you can touch and change. Refuse to engage with content that profits from your outrage. To keep your heart clean enough for responsible action. Refuse to perform emotions you don't feel. To become trustworthy to yourself and others. Refuse to consume what doesn't nourish. To protect your capacity for wonder and love. This is pruning, not withering. Every no returns weight to your yes, lets it land with the gravity of something that matters. Start slow and choose one refusal today. A small clean cut. Sit with the quiet. Watch it widen into space, and space into a life you recognize. Air in the room, time with edges, a heart keeping its own steady rhythm. Modern life trains you to live 2 inches behind your forehead, planning, scrolling, optimizing, while the rest of you goes missing. You've become what philosopher-physician Drew Leder calls the absent body. So focused on mental life, digital life, optimal life, that you've forgotten you have a body, not the body in your fitness app or Instagram photos, but the actual meat of you, breathing, digesting, sensing, aging. Maurice Merleau-Ponty, a French phenomenologist of perception, reminds us why this disappearance costs so much. Maurice Merleau-Ponty wrote, "The body is our general medium for having a world, but your body has become a transportation device for your head, a tripod for your phone, an inconvenience to be optimized, a self-improvement project. When did you last feel your feet on the ground?" The solution isn't more body optimization. That's just mental colonization of the physical. Don't manage the body. Re-enter it. Your ancestors didn't exercise. They moved. They didn't diet. They ate what was available. They didn't track their sleep. They slept when tired. Their bodies weren't projects, but partners. not problems to solve, but the means through which life was lived. David Abram, a cultural ecologist and philosopher, writes about the spell of the sensuous, how indigenous peoples maintain sanity through sensory connection to the living world. You maintain insanity through sensory disconnection, mediated entirely through screens, living in what Abram calls a civilization that seems to have forgotten its primordial kinship with the enveloping earth. Return to your body, not through another app, but through what your body knows, but has forgotten. Walk without podcasts. Let unstaged sound retune your nerves. Footsteps become a metronome. Eat without screens. Taste sharpens. Fullness speaks sooner. And a simple meal becomes an encounter rather than fuel. Breathe without counting. Feel your ribs, throat, and belly move. When attention settles, your breath lengthens by itself. Touch actual textures. Wood grain, stone, fabric, skin. Friction pulls you out of concept and back into contact. Move without metrics. Stretch, sway, dance, lift. Play for how it feels, not for steps or streaks. Presence begins at the skin. Return to sensation, and the world answers back. Air with temperature, bread with crust, a voice with grain. And let the return be ordinary. Soles on floorboards, steam on your face, the weight of a hand you love. Live from there. When you inhabit your body, time thickens, edges sharpen, and the mind grows quiet enough to hear life answer back. In a world where everything must be productive, the most revolutionary act is to create something useless, but beautiful. Oscar Wilde wrote, "All art is quite useless." He meant this as praise. Useful things serve purposes outside themselves. Art serves nothing but itself. In your life of pure utility, where every action must generate value, every moment must be leveraged, you've lost access to the useless, which is to say, the sacred. Your ancestors sang songs no one would hear, carved patterns no one would see, told stories that would die with the telling. They didn't create content. They created because creation is what humans do, as natural as breathing, as necessary as love. But we've been trained to monetize every gift, optimize every talent, platform every passion. We don't sing unless we're good at singing. We don't draw unless we can draw well. We've professionalized play and wondered why it stopped being playful. Gaston Bachelard, a French philosopher of imagination, wrote about the poetics of space, how humans naturally create beauty in their living spaces, not for show, but for soul. But your space is optimized for productivity, or Instagram, not for what Bachelard calls inhabited space, space that holds dreams. The philosopher Byung-Chul Han argues that even beauty has been replaced by the smooth, the optimized, the pleasing, the likable. But beauty requires roughness, strangeness, the possibility of failure. Beauty can disturb, can confuse, can fail to generate engagement. That's what makes it beautiful, rather than merely pretty. What's the solution, you ask? Well, begin creating useless beauty. Write poems no one will read. Sing songs in the shower. Arrange flowers for yourself. Cook meals for yourself. Learn an instrument and suck at it. Dance with your shadow, not to become a poet, singer, chef, musician, dancer, not to have another skill for your resume, but to remember what it feels like to create for the joy of creation, to make something that serves no purpose. except to briefly increase the amount of beauty in the world. What's one useless thing you used to love doing before technology and perfectionism took over? Comment below. Maybe it becomes someone else's kryptonite. Now, you stand at the threshold of a decision. Not a decision about what to do, a decision about how to be. You've chased every possible life, every possible self, and found, beneath them all, a quiet ache, the hunger to be real. But there's a quieter path, the one that begins right here, the path of becoming real, of choosing this life over all possible lives, of saying yes to the specific, limited, mortal reality of your actual existence. Tomorrow, the same phone will glow, the same choices will wait, but you can meet them differently. You can choose constraint over possibility. You can choose depth over surface. You can choose the difficult work of becoming real over the easy browsing of the potential. This is what Nietzsche meant by amor fati, the love of fate, embracing the one life you have rather than mourning the million you don't. The emptiness won't disappear, but it transforms from a void to be feared into a space to be inhabited, a dwelling place for the sacred, a home for the real, and this is your invitation to come home.